This is the fourth straight week of protests in Tbilisi. The police usually disperses peaceful demonstrators. They use tear gas, water cannons, and police batons against them. Georgians do not want their country to fall into the quagmire that is the Russian sphere of influence. They are calling for new parliamentary elections because they consider the October vote to have been tampered with. They want Georgia to move towards the West. The EU is only now reacting. After weeks of late-night protests, the detention of several hundred people, and many beatings. The country's incumbent president, Salome Zourabichvili, has called on the European Union to act and accuses it of half measures.
But you all know where Georgians have been fighting day and night, Europe has been slow to wake up and slow to react. While European flags are being banned in Tbilisi, Georgians are still waiting for biting measures to come from Brussels and Washington. And I hope we won't have to wait for a deeper crisis to occur for Europe to act.
Meanwhile, the head of the European Parliament had vague generalities to offer.
The European Parliament stands in solidarity with the people of Georgia, who have taken to the streets of Tbilisi and across the country for 2 weeks now, peacefully and passionately calling for a European future. This Parliament firmly condemns the repression of the Georgian opposition and the use of force against peaceful protesters.
The Georgian demonstrations are taking place under the slogan, "Wake up, Georgia." And I say, wake up, Europe, and stand with the protesters. What do you mean by, a lot can still happen between now and December 29th? What are you waiting for? For blood to be shed? For President Zourabichvili to be locked up, as was done to President Saakashvili? You say that the list of sanctioned persons is ready. Then at least do that. In Tbilisi is Alain Berset, Secretary General of the Council of Europe. The organization's website reads, "In the current tense and worrying context, the Council of Europe calls on all parties to avoid any escalation of tensions. It urges the authorities to refrain from the disproportionate use of force and to respect fundamental freedoms, in particular, freedom of expression and assembly." More meetings with civil society this afternoon, and more direct accounts of violence by young people still bearing the marks of beatings. The Council of Europe has unique means to assess facts and deliver justice. Domestic courts are the primary actors of the system. Alain Berset held talks in Tbilisi with key representatives of the authorities and the opposition. His mission may be the first concrete step to help lower tensions in Georgia and convince the authorities that their version of democracy under siege and obeying the law as they understand it will not succeed. But can the authorities in Tbilisi take so-called European values seriously if, in Strasbourg, they saw the parliament that was there?
The National Development Bank and Polenergia SA have signed a loan agreement from the funds of the National Reconstruction Plan for the construction of offshore wind farms in Poland. The amount of financing will be as much as 750 million zloty. It is worth mentioning that Polenergia is owned by Dominika Kulczyk, daughter of the late billionaire Jan Kulczyk. This is another tranche of huge funds for companies associated with the Kulczyk family. Too bad there is no money for those who are the most in need. 750 million zloty from the National Reconstruction Plan will be transferred to Polenergia SA, which is to build the Baltic 2 and Baltic 3 offshore wind farms with the funds. Polenergia SA invests mainly in renewable energy and gas power. Its main shareholder is Dominika Kulczyk, daughter of the late billionaire Jan Kulczyk. The smiling government is handing out gifts for Christmas, raises for everyone, hundreds of millions from the National Reconstruction Plan for Dominika Kulczyk's company, another gift after the concession, a financial montage for money that should go to the treasury sector. These funds should be used for the strategic energy transformation of Orlen and PGE, resulting in lower energy prices. What prices will be proposed by Kulczyk's company? We can try to guess from the prices of driving on the A2 highway. Who drives? Knows. There too, there was both a concession and a multi-year contract, and an overpriced amount as a result. Is anyone still surprised that money from the National Reconstruction Plan magically have been released after the change of government? Here is where the important question comes in. Does this mean that these wind farms implemented in the plan by this very company of Mrs. Kulczyk would eliminate the project or investments that PK and Orlen started? And they were, as far as I know, very advanced. This is yet another tranche of money going to companies affiliated with the Kulczyk family. In October of this year, Sebastian Kulczyk's Chemetika Group, which belongs to Sebastian Kulczyk, received 100 million zloty in government support. Whether they come from the National Reconstruction Plan, or whether they are budget funds, or from the National Development Bank, the only questions are whether it is a loan, to what extent it will be repaid, whether it will be written off in part, and how it will look in detail. The situation is different when it comes to the flood victims, for whom the assistance does not look so impressive. Not everyone has been paid those 8 or 10,000 zloty, although it must be admitted that under the pressure of media activities, including Republika Television, this has accelerated. In November, Dominika Kulczyk's foundation received 2 million from the Ministry of Education to implement a program to supply schools with menstrual hygiene products. Opposition politicians are outraged that money that could have gone to state-owned companies is being given to private companies. I, for one, believe that if it was money that was available to the Law and Justice government, these funds would have gone to expanding the energy shield to include entrepreneurs. It's worth noting that not all big businessmen can count on such a favor from the government towards their businesses. Donald Tusk is giving bonuses to those businessmen who are loyal to him, who have already proven themselves during the Law and Justice government when they have criticized and attacked the government of Mateusz Morawiecki at the time, while at the same time supporting the opposition at the time, whose leader was Donald Tusk. Supporting only those interests that are backed by people loyal to Donald Tusk is a clear example of building a private base that perhaps when Donald Tusk needs help will rise to the occasion.
A 2-day summit on aid to Ukraine is underway in Brussels. EU leaders and heads of government are assuring support for Ukrainians fighting the barbaric Russia, even though there will be no breakthrough decisions. Everyone is waiting for US President-elect Donald Trump to take power and present a peace plan. There is no more important issue in Europe today than security. That is why a 2-day European Union summit in Brussels was devoted almost entirely to what is happening on its eastern flank. As the Lithuanian president said, there can be no doubt about who is the victim and who is the aggressor in the war against Ukraine.
Russia is in the offensive mode. Russia is going forward. Russia feels to be stronger side in every possible negotiations, and it would lead not to just and sustainable peace.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was invited to the talks, stressed that, without help from Brussels and abroad, Putin will achieve his goal of destroying Ukraine and the Ukrainian nation.
The United States and EU and countries of Europe, this is very important. We need this unity to achieve peace. And I think only together the United States and Europe can really stop Putin and save Ukraine.
Brussels wants to help Ukraine, but has no intention of taking any groundbreaking decisions for the time being. The priority is to supply arms and ammunition to the brave Ukrainian soldiers. For the time being, the plan is to maintain and secure support for Ukraine. I am referring mainly to military support, the supply of air defense systems, artillery, ammunition, and what the soldiers need to defend the sovereignty of their country. But the EU is already waiting to see what US President-elect Donald Trump will do about the war in Ukraine. Trump proposes a peace plan, a stop to the bloodshed, and an end to the war that is claiming innocent victims every day.
Got to be a deal. No, got to be a deal. Too many people being killed. That is a war that's too many people. Got to make a deal. And Putin has to make a deal too. What deal? Do you think? Putin has to make a deal, and Putin would have never gone in if I was president. If I was president, we wouldn't have had inflation. Our oil prices would have been lower. I had a good relationship with Putin. He would have, despite the Russia hoax, which made it more difficult, if we had that election, if it were an honorable election, we wouldn't have had any of the problems that we're talking about right now.
Preferably as soon as possible. The barbaric Russian army is using the coming winter to attack Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which supplies people with heat and electricity. Energy terrorism is already affecting the population, hence NATO's urgent response.
19 systems are delivered to Ukraine to protect the critical infrastructure. So this will all be on the agenda, plus how to make sure that when peace comes, one day that we also think about the economy of Ukraine. Now,
Thank you so much.
While the Ukrainian president was in Brussels seeking diplomatic and military support, his country was being violently attacked by the Russians. Once again, they targeted civilians, this time the inhabitants of Kryvyi Rih and other Ukrainian towns. This kind of strategy, to paralyze the enemy through fear, to lower morale by massacring civilians, has been in use by the Russians from the very beginning. In retaliation, a Ukrainian drone strike deep inside Russia destroyed the stockpile of aviation fuel used for airstrikes against Ukraine. Today, sirens rang out again in Kyiv to warn of an airstrike. Residents scrambled for shelter. Antonina and her 8-year-old daughter have lost count of how many times they have had to hide from Russian bombs. I want to take my daughter to school in peace, go to work and live happily, but instead we hide from rockets. And she is scared just the same every time. Unfortunately, this is how life has been for these people for 1,030 days.
Poland's third F-35 multi-purpose aircraft has undergone its first test flight. According to unofficial information, the planes will soon be transferred from the manufacturer's airport to the American base, where Polish pilots will undergo training. The F-35 is called a flying computer and, as experts emphasize, its flight capabilities are not its main asset. Number 3 reports to the runway. The Polish checkerboard on the stabilizers leaves no doubt. Ultimately, under the agreement signed 4 years ago, Poland will receive 32 such aircraft. The uniqueness of these aircraft is emphasized around the world. This is a whole new generation of military aviation.
Each variant meets a specific need, but all models of the F-35 provide the pilot with stealth and an advanced platform to gather information and disperse information across the battle space.
The first key technology is stealth, that is, undetectability by enemy radar. Most information is top secret in this regard.
Stealth has two main components. The first one is its coding, and we really can't talk about the coding, it's classified, but there's multiple codings that go in there to help make it stealth or low observable. The other part of it is the geometry. So if you look at the aircraft, there's really no straight edges for the radar to reflect off of.
What makes the aircraft unique, however, are its targeting systems. Plugged into the battlefield management network, it becomes the eyes and ears of command and other units in the air, on water, and on land. The formations captured by this aircraft can be sent, for example, to the crews of Abrams tanks or the squad leaders who command those tanks, or to the Patriot missile launcher batteries. On top of that, the F-35 combines technological innovations that can be improved and developed over time. Already, pilots are equipped with helmets fitted with screens that display images from cameras placed around the aircraft. The pilot has a full depiction of what is happening around the aircraft and also underneath it. Also, the possibilities when it comes to getting information for the F-35 pilot are limited only by the imagination of the pilot himself, what he wants to see at any given moment. The most important thing is to bundle the aircraft into one system with other units. That's why Poland has ordered, along with the planes, the first export version of the US battlefield management system. It's a generational leap like never before in the Polish military and a significant increase in Poland's defense potential.